Welcome to this special edition of Hannity. I'm Judge Janine Pirro in for Sean. And tonight, a tale of two candidates. Both Donald Trump and Joe Biden traveled to New York today, but for very different reasons. About an hour ago, Biden shuffled into Radio City Music Hall in Midtown Manhattan for a glitzy, star-studded, high-dollar fundraiser. The event featured Lizzo, Leah Michelle, and Queen Latifah, and a panel moderated by Stephen Colbert between Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Joe Biden himself. A picture with the three presidents could be arranged for a mere $100,000. Some tickets were priced as high as $500,000. All told, the event raised a record $25 million for the Biden campaign. Meanwhile, a couple of miles away, former President Trump was at a funeral home. He accepted an invitation to attend a wake for NYPD officer Jonathan Diller, who was shot and killed by a violent career criminal roaming the streets of New York City. Take a look.
I want to thank Bruce and all of the people that have worked so hard to make this area beautiful and safe. And this is what happened. Is such a sad event, such a horrible thing. And it's happening all too often. And we're just not going to let it happen. We just can't. 21 times arrested, this thug. And the person in the car with him was arrested many times. And they don't learn because they don't respect. They're not given the respect. The police are the greatest people we have. There's nothing and there's nobody like them, and this should never happen. I just visited with a very beautiful wife that now doesn't have her husband. Stephanie was just incredible. Their child, brand new, beautiful baby, sitting there innocent as can be, and doesn't know how his life has been changed. But the Diller family will... You'll never be the same. You can never be the same. And we have to stop it. We have to stop it. We have to get back to law and order. We have to do a lot of things differently because this is not working. This is happening too often. It's an honor to be here. And again, I want to just thank all of you folks for allowing this. And Bruce, thank you. Bruce has been a friend of mine for a long time. He's done an incredible job out here. But this is such a sad occasion. The only thing we can say is maybe something is going to be learned. We've got to toughen it up. We've got to strengthen it up. This should never be allowed. Things like this shouldn't take place, and to take place so often. So thank you all for being here. It's an honor, and it's an honor for me to be here. This is a great family, the Diller family. I met the friends, and I met every one of them inside, and these are just incredible people that are just devastated. They're devastated. They've got a tough road.
And our own Brian Lianis has been reporting live on the scene, and he joins us now with more. Brian?
Judge, good evening. Visitation hours just ended here at the funeral home at 9 p.m. and will continue tomorrow. Today, thousands of police officers and members of this community stood in the torrential rain for a chance to pay their respects to fallen officer and hero Jonathan Diller, who was senselessly shot and killed on Monday night during a traffic stop. The accused killer with 21 prior arrests, including 9 felonies, and yet he was out free on the streets. The 31-year-old officer leaves behind his wife, Stephanie, and 1-year-old son, Ryan. Former President Trump reportedly spent more than 10 minutes privately meeting with Diller's wife before joining her to say a prayer over Officer Diller's casket. The former president then met with other family members, including Diller's mother. Mr. Trump was invited to the wake by Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman, who said Officer Diller's son now has thousands of dads, law enforcement members who will now help raise him. So far, more than $2 million have been raised for the Diller family. A memorial grows outside of the precinct that he worked at in Queens, and in Massapequa Park here, American flags, blue ribbons, and a thin blue line have been painted on the street, Judge, to honor their hero. Officer Diller's funeral is set for Saturday. Judge?
Brian, thanks so much. And outside of Biden's gaudy fundraiser in Radio City Music Hall, this was a very somber day in much of New York. Nothing will ever bring back Officer Diller, but thanks to the Tunnel to Towers Foundation and Frank Siller, the entire mortgage on Jonathan Diller's family's home will be paid off in full. Meanwhile, Barstool Sports founder David Portnoy raised $750,000 and then matched that donation in total. So $1.5 million will go directly to the officer's family. But again, Jonathan Diller should be alive today. This was a senseless murder committed by a violent felon who should have been in prison. This is the horrific result of the defund, dismantle social justice movement in America. The president of the Sergeants Benevolent Association of the NYPD is speaking out. Watch.
I am just happy to be an individual that represents men and women like that they're heroes. I mean, there's no other way to describe them.
Without question. And that's why the cover of the New York Post, it's your words. It says, this is your fault. Union's message to anti-police politicians. You are not welcome at Hero Cop's funeral. Those are your words and the words of your union. Who are you directing that at? And what do you mean?
It's directed at the city council, who seems to believe that criminals in today's day and age should be considered to be the victims of crimes, and that the police department and the police officers, they come and give their lives day in and day out. They're the ones who are the villains in this story.
Unfortunately, we don't see the same level of concern from the White House. Yesterday, Biden's press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, blamed Officer Diller's death on so-called gun violence. Take a look.
As it relates to the death of the officer, look, our hearts go out to this officer who tragically lost his life in the line of duty. We're also praying for his family during this difficult time, who now has an empty seat at their dinner table. President Biden is deeply grateful for the sacrifices police officers make to keep our community safe. This shooting is yet another painful reminder of the toll of gun violence, that what it's doing to inflict on families and our communities and our nation.
Here now with reactions are two men who attended Officer Diller's wake today. Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman, former NYPD Inspector, Fox News contributor Paul Morrow, and retired Tulsa Police Lieutenant Sean Larkin. All right, I'll first direct my question to the County Executive Bruce Blakeman. Bruce, you were there today inside the funeral home when the President Trump was there. Can you tell us what it was like inside?
Well, I have to tell you that President Trump was a source of comfort to the family. He spent over 10 minutes with Stephanie, the widow, in private. And then he went out into the main hall where the casket was laid and where Police Officer Diller's body was laid. And he and Stephanie prayed together. They talked about what a great guy Jonathan was. And then President Trump went to each member of the family and offered his condolences. And the family asked him to sign a mass card. He sat down, signed the mass card, and then he got up. And then Police Officer Diller's grandmother asked the president for a hug. And he embraced her and held her very tightly. And as he left that area with over 200 of friends and families of Police Officer Diller, with their little boy, Ryan, with Police Officer Diller's mother, Fran, with his brother and sister and son-in-law. They did something I've never seen before, Janine, at a wake. They gave him a rousing ovation. They clapped their hands and showed their gratitude for President Trump's kindness and for his compassion. It was a very, very beautiful and warm moment. It's one that I will never forget, and I think it was very comforting for the family. That
is very touching. I'll go to you, Paul Morrow. I have stood in many of those lines outside of funeral homes to honor fallen police officers killed in the line of duty. What was the mood there?
Well, it was obviously very somber. You know, we all feel like we've been to too many of these. But let me just emphasize what Bruce Blakeman just said. Everybody was very appreciative of President Trump's attendance, and they were also very appreciative of Bruce Blakeman's attendance. It means a lot to police who these days don't really feel like they're part of a system that supports them, that appreciates them. And, you know, when the chips are down, you learn who your friends are. And I have to say that the Sergeants Union got this exactly right. I don't think people quite realize how antithetical to the mission of the police the actions of the New York City Council and the New York State Legislature, who gets a pass. It's all the way up in Albany. But if anything, they do more damage to the mission of the men and women in blue. The City Council has recently passed upwards of 10 new measures that their new tactic is to bury the police in bureaucracy and paperwork. It's very cognizantly done. They know that a lot of this stuff can't even be met by the police because of personnel reasons. They just don't have enough bodies. They know what they're doing, and they're doing it cognizantly.
Officer Larkin, what do you think of the optics today? You have three presidents going to one particular location to raise money. It's a very festive affair for a president to stop the one president of the United States from running and regaining that presidency, who is attending the funeral of a slain police officer who stands there and talks about the law and order, which has totally been destroyed by many of the Democrats.
No, absolutely. You know, kind of as we talked about earlier, the president of the SBA here mentioned, basically, we don't want any anti-police politicians here. And he was very specific in who he was referring to, city council members, here in New York City. But when the president is flying in for a pre-planned fundraiser that's 6 miles from where this incident took place, 30 minutes away from this wake is happening, you alter your schedule. You show up, you stand up there, and you say, hey, I support the men and women, in law enforcement. I support this family. Pay your respects to them. You just don't go about your day and attend your fundraiser without acknowledging, this officer's death in the largest city we have in the country that's struggling.
Well, and, I'll go back to you, County Executive Blakeman. The whole idea of this, this fundraiser on the part of the Democrats, where President Biden got off that plane at 1:30. This whole event didn't start until tonight, and he chose to do a podcast with some celebrity as opposed to, as Officer Larkin just said, taking a trip to that funeral home. What do you think his priorities are?
Well, Janine, 80% of life is showing up. And if that's the case, and I believe that is, President Trump gets an A+, and President Biden gets an F. President Trump flew up to New York just to go to the wake.
Yeah.
And he had an event tonight back in Florida.
Yes.
And he came just for the purposes of paying his respects and comforting police officer Diller's family. I think that speaks volumes, and it's a stark contrast to the glitzy fundraiser tonight that President Biden couldn't take an hour and a half out of his schedule to commute to Massapequa,
It's a shame.
pay his respects to the family of a hero. I find that incredibly disappointing and distasteful.
Well, and, I'll go to you, Lieutenant Morrow. I mean, the truth is that, when the union president talked about the politicians, these New York politicians are the ones who have created the lawlessness where the criminals are not afraid of us and we're afraid of them. And when the union president said to the politicians, the New York City ones, don't show up, do you think they'll show up?
No, I would doubt it, because I suspect that they're not going to like the reception that they're going to get. And, it's the typical cowardice. And, you have to say to yourself, it's such an own goal. I mean, it's such a self-inflicted error.
Yeah.
To Bruce Blakeman's point, I mean, even a phone call from the president would have gone a long way.
Yes.
And it just seems to be, I mean, he couldn't say Lincoln Riley's name until he was shamed into it, and then he got it wrong. And now, they wonder why they are losing the rank and file of this country, the blue collar workers who keep the country in one piece and moving forward, keep us all safe. Firemen, cops, corrections, whoever. They wonder why they're losing those people across the race of all races. Now you're seeing why.
Okay.